Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar from the Institute for a Circular Society. This is a lunch and learn session titled Public Procurement for a Circular Society. It's my pleasure to welcome you here. My name is Willem Janssen. I'm a professor of public procurement law at Utrecht University and at the Rijksuniversiteit Groningen. I'm co-organizing this session with Sasha Tense, the program manager of Circular Regions within our institute, and we work together to ensure that the connected institutes, the Medical Hospital of Utrecht, UMC Utrecht, Utrecht University, Wageningen University, and Eindhoven University can come up with concrete transdisciplinary solutions for a circular future. And today we're focusing in this lunch and learn for about 45 minutes on a particular topic with a lot of potential, perhaps also untapped potential, called public procurement. We have a beautiful lineup of speakers joining us today, and the prime objective for this get together is to discuss the importance of public procurement for a circular society, but also to consider and explore potential obstacles or pitfalls that lie on the way towards using public spending for not just buying a piece of infrastructure or healthcare, but in fact also adding to a more sustainable future. So for today, this is where we're located in the sense of the research domains and the themes that we tackle within the Institute for a Circular Society. We focus on three major topics related to food, materials, and water. We have these cross-cutting focus areas that we believe are instrumental in getting this change across the finish line. And one of them, an important one, is procurement and logistics. So please look out for any future events related to circular regions or circular hospitals, because there's plenty more to come on different topics related to circularity. Our lineup for today is a combination of academia and practice, and this is how we like to set up our project within the Institute. I have the pleasure of introducing Ruben Nicolas, a postdoctoral researcher who finished his PhD in sustainable public procurement at the Utrecht School of Economics, and Sara Rademaker, a policy advisor, sustainable public procurement at the Dutch Unie van Waterschappen, the representative body of the Dutch water boards. And I'm sure they'll share a bit more about themselves here today, but these are all people that are either involved in public procurement and circularity from academia or from practice. And we hope that that combination will shed some light on actually exploring the potential and also obstacles. That being said, can I give you the floor, Ruben, to kick off the conversation for today? That being said, questions, please put them in the chat box. We will have short interventions from Ruben, Sara, and myself, just to kickstart the potential discussion. Of course, there is a Q&A afterwards, but don't save your questions until then. Please place them in the chat box so we can address them once we finish it. Ruben, the floor is absolutely yours.
Thanks, Willem, and also thanks for this introduction. I indeed did my PhD on sustainable public procurement, which is the larger umbrella term that circularity is part of. I work at, and still currently work at, the Utrecht School of Economics. So I took the opportunity to take a bit more of a system perspective and then try to kick off this lunch seminar by clarifying why circular public procurement is something that we should do, or we should at least pursue, setting the record straight. Okay, first of all, and I think this is maybe not new information for most of us, I want to maybe again clarify that public procurement, because it has such a large share in the world economy, has a large impact potential. So worldwide, and in the Netherlands it's slightly higher, 70% of the entire economy is basically expenditures done through public procurement. And the National Institute of Public Health and the Environment, the RIVM, they've done a mapping exercise to calculate how big the footprint of these expenditures are by looking at the different categories. And this is just a example for climate, by the way, but they also did it for circularity with not a good graph that I could find at the moment. But what this picture shows is that the footprint of public procurement is kind of proportional with the expenditure. So the share that procurement has in the economy is approximately the same as the share that it has in the use of resources when it comes to circularity. So what that means is that if procurement becomes more circular, if they start rewarding life cycle cost rather than upfront cost or the direct purchasing cost, or start to include criteria that encourage innovation for circularity, that means that the footprint of this big chunk of the economy can be reduced. Okay, I think many people know this, or at least know that this might be potentially true, but what is often missing is also the potential for industrial transformation, which would bring me to the next slide. Yes. Okay, so here there's a picture that depicts the innovation process of new solutions as they are invented, developed, eventually tested, and then are brought to market. And recent Nobel Prizes have been awarded to theories that relate to this process. The economy develops in a path-dependent way. So the technologies, the solutions that we currently have, they build upon earlier solutions, and they are developed iteratively, usually looking back at what was there, new solutions arise. So as new solutions come up, they come to market, usually they talk about innovation as first there's development, and then it just diffuses through the economy. Once you put it on the market, and if it's really better than all the rest, everybody will take it up. Well, circularity might be best from a life cycle perspective, but we know that not everybody is taking it up, and it's all just going, diffusing all by itself. And the reason is, and this is what the environmental economists have pointed out, that once new solutions go to market, once they're commercialized, there's a gap between self-sustained diffusion and this commercialization. And this is called the deployment stage. In this stage, you can click on the button now. In this stage, usually the costs are not competitive yet with the old solutions there. And why are the costs not competitive? Well, it might be because the environmental costs are not factored in, but it can also be, for example, with circularity, that the long run cost savings by using life cycle costing, that they are discounted because the long run, it takes a while. So there is this bias towards current costs over life cycle cost, meaning that for circular solutions, they have to work hard in a way to convince buyers that they might be competitive. And another reason is that maybe they're still not competitive in the beginning yet. And what makes solutions competitive is their further development. You can click the button again. Their further development. So how do solutions develop further? Well, they need to raise revenue. And public procurement can really play a big role here. So as revenue comes to new solutions, circular solutions, there is room for further development. There is room for feedback, knowledge accumulation. It becomes increasingly easier to mobilize upstream and downstream actors when this has been done before, when we learn how to do this, when we have best practices, when these best practices are shared. Also, other parties can draw on this knowledge, and they have less uncertainty, and then the circular solutions become cost competitive. So if I then summarize and final click, circular public procurement can really be used as a very effective accelerator in this deployment stage, because here is where government can take a lead and say, maybe it's not, or just on the verge of being cost competitive, but we're still going to invest in these solutions to further develop them and then change the status quo, change the path dependency. Yeah, it's been pointed out that very often we look way too much to new inventions and not so much on mainstreaming what is already there. And I think this applies for circular procurement. So that's it from me. Back to Willem then.
All right, thank you so much, Ruben, for this, I think, insightful link also with a more macro level and where circularity sort of fits in that regard. I think we'll also loop back to these aspects when we get to the questions. I see some people are using the chat box already. Please know that you should keep using that along the way. What I think is a next step after we've talked about potential is obviously the stages in which you can safely include circularity. And even though a little T is missing under relevant, it's clearly still very relevant under most stages in the procurement process. So just to give you a couple of examples, and that's I think how you should also approach circularity or any type of secondary public policy goal, is you look at the type of procurement that you have in front of you, and then you look at the procedure, right? You scope the market and you try to make sure that you are well aware of circular solutions that exist or potential for further innovation in there. But also, I think it revolves around the choices that you make related to technical specifications. If you continuously ask the stock standard old option, you won't leave room for future, more innovative circular solutions. Similarly, asking for quality in award criteria, or even, as Ruben rightly noted, I think the most sustainable option would be to look at more of a longer life cycle costing area in these criteria, and of course also to safeguard that finally in the contract, right? When you are working together as a contractor, is that you make sure that these criteria are also enforceable if need be. So it's really this, and I've noted the wheel that a colleague of mine, Fedor Svotanis, has made. It's really about the purchase, the perform, and the prepare phase, and of course prepare comes first. Prepare, purchase, and perform, and it's looking at in what stages circularity can play an important role. What's interesting here, when you look at these different stages, is that the law can very much limit or stimulate circularity. And I think what's interesting now, if we're looking at obstacles, at least the starting point is that most laws that we have in Europe are not built for circularity, and particularly those related to public procurement, because the starting point is that they mandate equal, transparent, and proportionate procedures in light of achieving an internal market for public procurement, meaning that foreign bidders are not discriminated and that we create one major market in Europe. So circularity, in that sense, is not the starting point. And I think that should at least be the start also of discussions that we're having about the possibilities that are currently in the public procurement directives. When we look at those directives, in 2014, we went from a procedural role of the law, right, solely focused on creating an internal market. And then we all of a sudden realized that circularity and other social societal objectives are vital to achieve, or public procurement is vital to achieve them. And we sort of have created this instrumental role, right? And in the 2014 reforms, there was more leeway created for circular labels, but also for, say, lowest life cycle costing. And now we're revamping these rules. So I think it's really a call to action also for those present here, is that there's potential to change those rules for the better, and perhaps also to take circularity as the starting point. And that's something that we're currently exploring also in a funded project by the Dutch Research Council, the CirClash project, where we look at solving clashes between circular and legal principles. I'll highlight two examples and then I'll give the floor to Sara. Inherently, there's an uncertainty related to many circular products, mostly because the estimation of their actual costs in the future is uncertain, right? And I think that comes at odds with the need to evaluate all bids equally at the moment. By law, we need to evaluate those bids equally. We need to be transparent about this. And there's an issue there with that future uncertainty. Similarly, is that we sometimes place limits on the length of a cooperation, right? Is that, say, for framework agreements in the EU, we say they can be for a maximum of 4 years, with the exception of perhaps certain scenarios. That means that circular business models that sometimes need reinvestment time or time to earn back those investments sort of fall off the wagon if we re-tender every couple of years. So I think my main point for the discussion would be we have some room and discretion within the law to include it. On the other hand, there's also still obstacles that I think deserve researching, and that's something that we hope to bring out of the Circlash project in due course. And now on to Sara. Can I give you the floor?
Yes, thank you, Willem. My name is Sara Rademaker. I work as a sustainable procurement policy officer at the moment for the Dutch water authorities, but I've been working in this line of work since 2015 for several different government organizations, mainly municipality of Utrecht and Rotterdam, and also for the national government. So I've been in this field of work already for quite a while. So I'll try to keep my talk within 5 minutes. But if you want to know more about it, of course, feel free to ask some questions. So I thought I'd tell you first a little bit about how to put circular procurement into practice. What type of instruments can you use? And when we started with this around 10 years ago, we were looking to, for example, the R ladder. It's like the refuse, reduce. You can see it here on the sheet as an instrument also for circular procurement. But we quickly found out that it's actually very difficult to make this into a kind of comparable criterion in a procurement phase, because it's very hard to compare which solution you get offered from the bidders. How does it fit onto this ladder, and how do you judge it? So actually we found out the R ladder is really useful to make you think in a more circular kind of way. It's more like a guideline, and it can be a guideline for government organizations or for the market parties that are willing to compete in your procurement phase. So it's a really useful guideline, and we did use it, for example, within the municipality of Utrecht to set 5 main criteria by which you could mark your procurement as circular, because people want to know, I want to start with circular procurement, but how do I know when does my procurement define as circular? So we made 5 criteria. We said, well, your procurement, you can, it's circular if you focus on the use of material or products that are already available. Or if you make use of renewable, for example, bio-based materials or things like that. And the third one, when you look at the products or the solution that you're buying, it's good to look at minimizing environmental impact. So, for example, if you look at life cycle assessment, choose a product that has less impact also in the production and the transportation phase. And then we added a 4th and a 5th criteria, which is more focused on a kind of a process. So how do you create conditions for a longer lifespan of the product? One option is, for example, if you ask your contractor to also be responsible for reparations or maintenance work. And the last one is how to create conditions for reuse in the future. And for example, you can look at an appointment with your contractor that he actually takes your office furniture back in the future and reuses the components. And well, our suggestion was you should already make appointments about these kind of future appointments already by the time you start your procurement phase. So that's how we use this R ladder as a guideline to define a circular procurement. And also we used it kind of as a monitor. So every procurement that we that was listed as circular, it made us able to define how much of our annual volume was circular. Okay, the next sheet, please. And another important instrument that came up in recent years and is starting to get more and more important is life cycle analysis. I'm not sure, I don't think I really need to explain the instrument here, but the good thing is that we have in the Netherlands, it's called an environmental cost indicator, MKI, and this gives you a quantitative value and makes you able to compare one solution to the next solution. For example, if I need to make a new road, I can say, okay, I want the road construction with the lowest environmental cost indicator. And so then the market, the bidders need to see, hey, do I have a more sustainable type of asphalt? Or if I make the road a little bit thinner but more strong, I need less material. And it gives you a quantitative way to compare the solutions during the bidding phase. And it's also useful during the design phase, previous to your procurement phase, because then maybe you're making certain decisions yourself. And then you can also use this indicator to compare different options. There's also a few downsides about this quantitative approach, because it tends to simplify environmental value. For example, it doesn't look at added value, for example, nature solutions, more biodiversity or more climate adaptation. It cannot be expressed in this indicator. So that's always good to keep in mind. And there's also some perverse incentives. For example, the reuse of certain materials brings down the value. So the lower the value, the better. But sometimes the use of certain slags, which is a byproduct of waste incineration or steel production, and it gives you, you get this material for free, basically. You don't need to count it in the calculation, but it might have some negative side effects on the environment, which is also hard to express in this value. So it's a really good way to compare quantitative your different solutions, but you need to keep in mind these perverse incentives and the risk of simplification. And the next sheet, please. So these, I just talked about the instruments that you can use more on a project base within one single project. But also it's good to look at how to approach this more on an organization level and where to focus on, because within a government there are many different types of procurement, from pencils to large constructions, buildings, roads. So we made an analysis similar to the visual that Ruben showed earlier on, and where we set off the volume to the environmental impact, and we differentiated between carbon emissions and material usage. So the one that's shown here is the material use graphic for the municipality of Utrecht. And well, the fun fact is that it's maybe a bit hard to read here, but I'll read it here, that, for example, 35% of the euros, the euros went to public space, which accounted for 64% of all material use. So there's definitely your need to focus as a municipality on public space, because that's where you use the most materials. And also I agree with what Ruben said earlier. There's not always a need for innovation. Sometimes there's just a need for more behavioral change and to focus more on reuse what you already have. I always made the joke that my biggest mission was just to turn around the pavement tiles. I mean, they're made of concrete and there's so many of them. And if you just focus on reusing them, you save so much new production of concrete. So there's definitely also more behavioral change within government organizations, the tendency to just say after 20 years we just replace certain materials. And you could start by more checking, hey, can they last for a longer lifespan. So we made actually a whole plan within the municipality to look at this kind of embedding this circular way of thinking within the organization, and also to start earlier, not to by the time the procurement phase starts. Often many decisions are already made. There's already the construction drawings and everything, it's already finished. So if you want to change something, you need to start earlier. So we started also a whole line about communication, knowledge development, standardization of criteria. And also, for example, we changed that not all the materials just go back to the construction company, but we keep them for reuse. That's also a significant change. Next sheet, please. Yeah, was just one image I wanted to show you. So we looked at public space that had the focus, but we also made a kind of tailor-made approach for each category, because for some categories like energy, it takes a different approach than a public space, or more the facilities kind of things that government organization buy. So we defined levels of ambition for each different category, depending on impact, environmental impact, but also market influence. For example, laptops, a big international company is not going to change the way they produce their laptops for a small municipality in the Netherlands. So there you should more focus on reuse and lengthening the lifespan of the laptops rather than changing the production. So each category has its own dynamics. It's very important just to bring people together within your organization to talk about the opportunities for circular procurement, bring together the policymakers with the people that do the daily work, and start in time, and not so that you're by the time the procurement phase starts, you're actually too late to make a difference. That was my talk.
All right, thank you so much, Sara, for those insightful thoughts, also on like more of a view from the municipality of Utrecht, your former work. I will stop sharing the slides to allow for some more space to see everyone's faces. I saw some questions had already been asked in the slides. The recording can be viewed afterwards, and also if you want the slides, there's an email address already noted from my colleague Sasha Tensen. And I saw that Sara was already so kind to answer the one of the questions about are there any advanced criteria. I also very much like the initiatives of the website that you referred to there. We have some space for questions right now, so of course leave them in the chat. But first off, maybe we can look a little bit at because we've shared some insights about the potential of the legal side of things. But maybe the question first off to Sara and Ruben, what do you see as the biggest issue right now? Why isn't the procurement fully circular yet? Sort of like a broad question that I'll allow you to go wherever you want. Sara.
Well, I think, like I said before, it's a combination of behavioral change within government organizations and the similar within market, within de, hoe zeg je dat, opdrachtnemers?
The contractor.
Contractors. Of course, it's often, you tend to earn more money if you sell a new product. So maybe there's also a need to shift more to services like maintenance. It should be maybe valued better. So there's a behavioral thing of like always wanting something shiny and new, and also more safeguarding what is already there. And then there's the way like how do we earn our money then, and that maybe needs to shift a little bit as well. And there's also a tax thing. The taxes on raw materials are low, and the taxes on labor are quite high. So that's also not a very good incentive for things like maintenance. And
yeah. So we need to focus on different things. I think you rightly note that we need to look at also other instruments than just public procurement, but also behavioral change within organizations. I'll come back to you, Ruben, but I see a question in the chat that sort of taps into what you just noted, Sara. So I just wanted to tackle that first, if you'll allow me, Ruben. One of the questions here are, what do you recommend to get all of the administration involved to overcome resistance to change? So it's sort of like a change management question of how do you make sure that there's like a tsunami of circularity that happens within an organization? It's a question for you, Sara.
Well, I don't have the answer. I think every organization is different, so it all comes down to people on the floor, the local heroes that take their organization and make this kind of this tailor-made approach, like what works for you, and it can be something different for the for different parts of the organization also. But I can give one example of something that really worked within the municipality of Utrecht, was the fact that we actually bought this piece of land with some buildings on it where we could make a depot for reusing, well, these pavement elements, for example, and other elements for the public space. Because we actually got rid of the depots years ago because we thought we'd leave it to the market. And actually to regain control of actually our own materials, we already bought them. And then when we change the street, we just give everything back to the market, and to regain a little bit control over that. And we just have this depot, we can reuse these things, and you need to go to the depot first. And if we have nothing available, then you can buy something new. And actually that really helped to accelerate the whole thing. And then at the same time, we were telling the story everywhere to all the different departments, and we made some criteria mandatory. And then it really helped to accelerate and also make people enthusiastic, because they could go to this physical place and hear the story. And so that really helped to accelerate enthusiasm for circularity. And at the same time, we gave like 300 people a course on how to use this environmental cost indicator in their procurement phase. So it was a combination of knowledge, enthusiasm, this physical space. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I think the point also of like sort of like stockpiling and saving is often a sort of like an obstacle in this whole supply chain, as that there's a sort of a disconnect between supply and demand, and there's an intermediary that needs to pick up. So I think the initiative also for stockpiling, I think particularly also in with shifting global instability, I think will become even more important also when you consider other types of materials. I see some other questions that we'll get back to in the chat, but not before I give Ruben the floor to my initial question, major obstacles.
Yeah, so I think the point that Sara raised, and I see it in the chat as well, about the different cost structure also when it comes to labor, that remains a thing, but also the taxes, the tax scheme. So that's the bigger picture answer that I endorse. But in addition, I think what also makes it hard at this stage is that like the equivalent of a depot but then among contractors, it takes time to set up. And if we can at best do a framework agreement that lasts 4 years, it might be risky for contractors to build up not just a depot, but maybe an alliance with other actors. So setting up alliances can be risky or costly, but it's necessary for circularity to have upstream and downstream activities, and this cannot always be done by one contractor. So sometimes they have to build alliances. But by the time they've done this, if then maybe a framework agreement or something else like that is already passed, or the project is done, it might not be worth the while. So I think to make circular procurement more common, the way in which we procure or the types of contracts that we have should also fit a bit more to this, not project perspective, but a bit more on a program level, have room for the longer term.
So sort of like a frontward-looking approach, not just a simple contract, but perhaps more also the relationship that you have with contractors, but also what the strategy that you have as a public authority requires you to do in terms of investments, right? I'd like to think that procurement is something that we do for future generations, right? Maybe that can be our next webinar. Sara.
Can I give an example for that? Because I gave a lot of examples so far from this municipality that I worked for, but I've been working since a year for the Dutch water authorities. And I heard one really nice example in the water sector, because they're all the water purification plants. They are mostly from the 60s, 70s, so they're all ending their lifespan. So there's a huge a need to renovate or replace these plants, and actually if all the water authorities now start to put that on the market can't even do all of it. It's too much. So we need to work together with the markets to get a grip on this huge task that is ahead of us. And one really interesting development is what really was developed with the market parties was this kind of circular type of water plant which made of set modules that you could have one module and you can add another one, and it was a whole circular design. It's called Vertigo, if I remember correctly. And it's a really interesting thing because it was developed with market parties and with the different water authorities, and they're now looking to scale it up, and it will make it more easier to adapt, to make them smaller or larger depending on population growth. And I think it's a really nice example of how we really need each other, and especially with these big tasks when they come up. And I think it's similar for bridges in the Netherlands. They're all built in the 60s, 70s, so they all need to be renovated now. Also there's a need for collaboration and for circularity. If you can make them joined, I think you get to the better solutions. Yeah.
For sure. I'm just looking at the chat. There's a couple of questions. Maybe let's tackle the one about competition, because I think that's an often heard conversation in the sort of relationship between governments and markets. Maybe I'll kick off on this one, and then I'd love to hear your views, Ruben and Sara. Is a lot of the legislative changes that are happening at the moment are also inspired by the discussion of having single bids or no bids for public contracts. The thought process, and I don't necessarily condone it, but that seems to be the case, is we need different rules to have more competition. And I think that's something that's visible in many of the member states within the European Union, at least, but also in the Netherlands. We've had the Van Brienoord bridge discussions where only one consortium made a bid. We've had a contract for public transport concessions where there were no bids from transport companies in the province of Zeeland. And I think this is a tight line to walk. I would always say that there needs to be some type of market scouting to see what's been happening. So explore the market, know what that market looks like and what they can offer. If you know that, then at least you start off on the right footing. But I think also there's a certain amount of buy-in when it comes to circular transitions, is that in many cases there won't be, not all contractors on the market will be able to offer what you're asking for. So in a way, by procuring in a circular manner, you are limiting the market. And I think that is ultimately, but maybe it's a hypothesis that the rest can respond to, that's in fact what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to create a trendsetter effect where others tag along, right? So in a way, a lack of competition is perhaps an old school way of looking at procurement if you're looking at it through the lens of low cost procurement, rather than saying that you're wanting to foster and spur new innovations or give scale up opportunity to existing innovations from a circular perspective. So those would be my 2 cents. But Ruben, Sara, I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on this competitive element, which is sort of like seems to be existing. The more we ask from a circular perspective, the less competition we have.
Yeah, if I can jump in, I think this goes for any criterion. The more criteria you put in, the more specific your demand becomes, and technically you limit the market or you narrow down the market. So this is inherent. But of course, there should be kind of a sweet spot where there is some competition. And the EU has been collecting these cases on green procurement, and I think the same would hold for circular procurement, is that it's a bit trial and error. Being too ambitious, yeah, then the market might be too limited and there might be no people to submit a bid. But there are also cases, and I've also had them in the Netherlands, where it might be necessary to check upfront through a market consultation, look, we have a plan to do this circular tender. We are thinking of this type of contract and this type of criteria or requirements. Would this be something interesting? And then very often there will be these very basic solutions or pain points addressed by contractors saying like, oh, if you put it as a requirement, I'm not going to be able to make it. But if you make it a criterion and I can come up with this other solution, I can compensate so and so here, I can ask so and so to do this, and I'll make your bid. I'll even do what you want me to do, just not in the exact way that you would require me. And the same goes for types of contracts. So sometimes it's necessary to feel a bit more during the preparation what's the room or what is feasible. Just a bit extra preparation, I think, could do the trick.
Yeah. All right, Sara?
Yeah, I completely agree with all that Ruben says. I have loads of practical examples but I think the time is too short. Maybe one quick one. For example, with working clothes, we had a requirement that they also had to take it back and take care of the reuse or recycle. And that made already that I think maybe 80% of the market didn't make a bid because they just want to import cheap working clothes from wherever, and after that they don't want to have anything to do with it anymore. So there remained 5 parties that actually have their production line within Europe and also can take care of the recycling. So we definitely limited the market, but we did a market consultation up front, so we still knew there were enough parties interested to tag along with this. But within big construction or in markets where there's more limited bidders, you should be more careful. And then also a more program-based approach can be attractive. For example, I know one example from also a water board that every time they had to renovate one gemaal, what is it, like something that processes the water in the in the area. Sorry, I don't know the term, but they did them one by one, and then and they needed to do 20 a year, and they only made 6 a year because it just took too much time. So then they decided to say, okay, no, we have 20 a year, we make it one big order, and then it was more interested for the market. It took them less time, and they had a more program approach for to change all these gemalen. Sorry, my English. But yeah, so I think it depends on the market. Pumping station. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. We're helping each other out in this webinar. Thank you so much. I'm also mindful of the time. I'd love to give our 2 guest speakers one more opportunity to share some of their thoughts, maybe some food for thought for the afternoon after your lunch. What do you think public authorities, people in the ecosystem of public procurement, whether they be involved in policy or procurement themselves, or they're bidding for contracts, what do you think they should do differently tomorrow? And what do you think is the long-term approach, the long-term solution? And if I can really limit you to maybe a couple of sentences for both the short and the long term, and then everyone can be on their merry way. Ruben, can you go first?
On the short term, use more criteria than requirements. On the long term, invest in technical knowledge. It's become very procedural, but I think it's necessary to know what the state of the art is to be in that sweet leading spot. The leader peloton approach is what they call it at Rijkswaterstaat. You need to be a front runner in some regards, but it shouldn't be too far away from the mid market, the main body, the peloton. So that's a long run investment to make.
All right. Thank you so much. Sara?
Well, I think I just have one, which is to be aware of the impact you can create. I mean, I've once calculated if with my household, we take, we reuse some of our stuff, or we take shorter showers, we can save 100 kilograms of CO2 annually. But if I manage to have one whole municipality take better care of reuse of their pavement materials, we can save tons of CO2. Like, it's a multitude of the impact that you can make as an individual. I'm not saying your individual actions are not important, but with your role within public procurement, you can really multiply your influence. So be aware of this influence that you have, and tell your colleagues, and just make it big.
Fantastic. Four great points of perspective. And if I can add for the law, I think my hypothesis would be, in the short term tomorrow, there's more possibilities at present that you can do within public procurement law. So always question those naysayer type of legal advisors that might be around you, I think. And secondly, for the long term, also get involved in the revision process, if in any type, way, or form. I think it's really important that all the actors are involved in shaping rules that are actually effective. And because they're being revamped right now, I think now is the time. So long term is already perhaps Q2, when we get new public procurement directives or regulation. Let me close off by really thanking our speakers for today, Sara and Ruben, and maybe just a small round of applause, even albeit digitally. Let me see. You can also do it here, right? Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. It was really a pleasure to talk about these things a bit further. Please also keep an eye out for any future events that we're organizing. Our conference in June, taking place related to circular hospitals, but also circular regions. Feel free to join us there, whether you're a scientist or a stakeholder working in practice. We'd be happy to have you there. Thanks so much, and speak again.
Ik had nog even de vraag in de chat te lezen.